You're welcome back to my class. Today we are going to conclude for loop. So what I just want to show you in this for loop now is a practical example of what you can do with a for loop. Now I want to use a for loop to calculate the factorial of a number. So we are going to find the factorial of 5 and the factorial of many other numbers. We are going to see how the computer is going to calculate it very fast and give you the output. So let's just go straight into our PyCharm and write a program on how to calculate the factorial of a number using a for loop. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do now is that I will declare a variable and I will give it a name and I will assign a value to that variable, and then I will declare another variable and I will assign that number that I want to calculate the factorial, and then we'll continue the process. Let's call it factorial. So I'm declaring a variable and I'm calling it factorial, and I'm going to assign 1 to it, and then I will say n, assign say 6 to it. So what this means is that I want to calculate the factorial of 6. Now that is what I want to calculate. Now I will now come here. Now I will now bring in my for loop. So I'll say for I will declare another variable, which is a placeholder, a temporary place that I will use for my iteration. Then I will say x for x in. Now I am going to use a data structure. In one of my classes, I have taught you range, right? Range data structure. So I'm going to use that range data structure here. So for x in range, now range has 3 parameters: start, stop, and step. The start is the beginning of the range. The stop is where you want to end the range, and then the step is the increment. So in this one now, I am going to say range, and I'm going to start from 1, and then I will say n plus 1, because I want it to include 6. So it's going to be 6 plus 1, which is what? 7. If I don't add the 1, if I leave it like this, right? This is my start, this is my stop, right? Even if I don't put the step, by default, the step is 1. But if I'm going to put the step, I'll just put 1 here. So start, stop, and step. But I don't want to put the step because the default is 1. Now, if I do this, it's going to count from 1 to 5. But I want it to include the 6. So that's why I'm adding the 1 to it. You can go back to my class on range and you will understand it. But if you follow me well in this one, you will still be able to understand. So range has 3 parameters: start, stop, and step. So in this case now, my start is 1, my stop is n plus 1, and n is 5, n is 6. So 6 plus 1 is 7. My step, because I'm not defining it here, is going to use the default, and the default step is 1. So it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That is simply what this range function is going to do for me. So range function is going to pick 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And now I'm going to use that to calculate my factorial. Now I will come here and activate the statement that I want. So the first thing it will do, this range will give me 1 to 6. So it will copy 1 into x and then come in. And what will it do? So I will say factorial, right, equals to factorial multiply by x. Okay, now let me change this number. Let me change this to p. Then I'll come back here and change this to p. All right. Then I will say print. Inside this place, I'm going to use a format string. So what will be my format string? I will type here the factorial of, then I will do this is, then I will do this again. I will explain. Then here I'm going to call my format function format, and I'm going to supply the parameter. The factorial of n is factorial. All right. So this is what I have. Now, I'm using my for loop to find the factorial of a number. So the first thing I did was to declare a variable called factorial, and I assign 1 to it. Now, n equals to 6. This is the number that I want to find the factorial. So I'm also going to declare a variable and then assign this 6 to that variable, which is n. Then I will now come to my for loop. So for p in range, so I'm using my range data type. I'm calling the range function. So I'm calling the range function, and this range function is expecting 3 parameters. The first parameter is start, the second parameter is step, and the second parameter is stop, and the third parameter is what? Step. But because I didn't declare the third parameter, it's going to use the default value, which is what? Increment of 1. So it will start from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That is why I'm adding n plus 1. Now, for p in range, meaning this range is going to give me 1 to 6. This one, this place, this will be the same thing as, let me just put this here, to be the same thing as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That is what this thing is going to give to me. This is the same thing as this, 1 to 6. All right. So if it is 1 to 6, so what it's going to do is this for loop will come here, pick the first one, put it into this p, and then factorial equals to factorial times p, meaning this is not equal to assignment. So factorial is 1 already. So 1 times 1, it will reassign it back to factorial. Then it will come back again and copy 2 into p, and then it will come in and say 1 times 2, which is 2. It will now reassign it back to factorial. And then it will come back again and copy 3 and put it inside p, and then come in and say 2 times 3, 6. It will reassign that 6 to factorial. Then it will come back again and copy 4, bring it to p, then come in and say 6 times 4, 24. It will come back again and reassign it to this. To come back again, copy 5, put it inside p, and then come in. And then that would be 24 times 5, like that, until it will finish up to 6. Now, the final output will now be supplied. So let me delete this. So the final output will now, it will now come out of this loop completely, this for loop, to come out of it to this print function. This the statement, the next statement outside the for loop. So it would come out to this statement and say, and print this string literal. This string literal, the factorial of this expression is telling me that I need an evaluation of an expression inside this string literal that I'm supplying. So it's going to print out a string literal. This curly bracket is telling me that there is an expression that is required. So I'm calling my format function. This dot format, I'm calling the format function, and I'm supplying it with this parameter. So n, which is the 6, is going to be supplied to this first evaluation. Then this factorial, which will be what? The value that will be inside this place will now be supplied to this, and then it will print it out. So what it will print out to be, the factorial of 6 is, it will tell me the value. So I'm going to execute this. See, the factorial of 6 is 720. Now with this program, all I need to do is supply any value. Now I can decide here to supply the value at runtime. So all I need to do is call my input function at this point. And so I'll just do this. I'll say input, calling the input function, and then I will say enter a value here to find the factorial. Now, whatever value I'm going to supply, right, will be a string object, and that will throw me an error if I'm to execute this. So I have to typecast it to integer. So I'll come here, int. So whatever value I am supplied with, so I have to typecast it. So at this point now, it's going to ask me to display, enter a value here to find the factorial. So I'll execute this. You see, enter a value here to find the factorial. Okay, so here, let me do this. Enter a value here to find the factorial. Re-execute it again. Stop and run and rerun. Okay, so here I'm going to put 5. Then I press enter. It will display the factorial. So the factorial of 5 is 120. I will execute it again. Enter a value here to find the factorial. I will put 7. Now press enter. So the factorial of 7 is 5040, right? If I execute this again, enter a value, I can put 100. What will be the factorial of 100? See, this is the factorial of 100. See the value. So you can imagine 1 times, 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, 5, like that, up to 100. So that is it. I can find the factorial of any number just by this simple script that I've written, right? Just by this simple script I've written, 9. So the factorial of 9 is 362880. So just with this simple script, I can find the factorial of any number. So practically, I wanted to show you how you can use a for loop, and that is what you've seen. So in the next class now, we are going to see the while loop. So till then, bye-bye.